CS5 is the first time that all three Flash platform tools are together in the same suite. And one of the tools, Flash Catalyst, is a brand new tool that lets you take static designs from Photoshop and Illustrator and turn them into interactive pieces of content with video, interactive components, and all the things you would expect from a Flash application. One of the great things about Flash Catalyst is I can start here in Photoshop, and I've got a static design, and then I can automatically bring that and import it into Flash Catalyst. It'll maintain all the layers and all the artwork that I've got, so I can start turning this static design into an interactive application. In this case, I've got an interactive restaurant guide that I want to create. And I've got multiple states, so in Catalyst you can visually see the states of your application. I have a start state, a home state, and then some subpages. And you can start to turn this into a real-life working application, including video. So one of the big features of Flash Catalyst is that I can import video and make it a part of my Flash experience. So let me go to File, Import, Video or Sound File, and then I can select the RIA Intro FLV here, and it'll bring that video file to me here on my artboard. And just like any other layers panel in all the other creative suites, I can drag this down so it'll appear a little bit lower in the priority chain. We've meant this to look exactly like all the other Creative Suite tools so that I can create my Flash content and still use my Photoshop or Illustrator skills. Once I've got the video imported, I can make it resizable, so I can make it a little bit bigger and it'll be part of that application. You can see here I've got this blue sort of control bar at the bottom with a play button and a seek button. So that's the wireframe video control, but I can set it to none. So in this case I want to create a little bit more passive experience. I can also adjust the properties here. So I want to make sure that the opacity for this version of the video in this first start state is 1. So we'll just make it very barely visible, almost invisible. And then I can switch over to the home state and see exactly what the home state's supposed to look like with all the layers for the home state visible as opposed to that initial start state. So here I've got the video player that I want to make visible. I want to have it appear in the background. And I want to make sure that the opacity in this state, instead of 1, is going to be 100. So we're going to hide it behind there and have it play as we come in. So to make sure it plays, I also want to set the autoplay property and the loop property so the video will continue to play as I move through the application. Now in the start screen, if I go back and look at the timeline, you'll see that if I select the start to home screen, you see I've got all the state transitions there. It automatically detects that I've got a fade transition from the start state to that home state when I made the video a little bit more visible. So I can use Catalyst's timeline to just drag these out, make it bigger. I could add my own actions here, so if I want to do a rotate or rotate 3D, I can instantly create very engaging, complex transitions without writing any code. So once that's set up, I can use the play button here to make sure that's going to behave correctly, and that looks like it is. And then one of the other features of Flash Catalyst that's kind of nice is the ability to do design time data. When you're creating an application, you want to make sure that the data you're seeing and the data you're going to use looks a lot like the data that's going to be brought in from a developer side or from a database or data source. So to do that, we can use artwork from our Photoshop file and show exactly how that's supposed to look in the design time data panel. So if I select this list component here, you can see I've got a list button with buttons that are going to let me go back and forth, and then switch to the design time data panel. I can see all the different pieces of that list and all the dynamic parts of that list so that I can start making changes. So I can change some of this text from maybe Aqua FE Farina. We want to switch these around. So the first one's going to be celery, and the second one's going to be Aqua E Farina. And then that'll automatically change for me inside of Flash Catalyst. I can also change images. So if I click on an image here, I get a list of all the assets that I brought in from Photoshop, and I can scroll through them to figure out which one I want to show in this particular view of the restaurant, and I can change them as needed. So we can change that to this thumbnail instead. So I'm able to create kind of an exact picture of what this data is supposed to look like, even if it's not connected to a real database somewhere. One of the key features of Flash Catalyst, or one of the most important features of Flash Catalyst, is the ability to take that static artwork and convert it into a dynamic component. So in this case, if I go to my Subpages menu, I've got this main menu text and this rectangle, this blue rectangle. And so I want to turn this piece of static artwork and this text into a button, a working button that's going to behave with all of my Flash applications. So I can select both of those objects, and then use Catalyst's Convert Artwork to Component feature to say, make these two things into a working button. It'll automatically create a button from that. It'll give me the states for a button, so I have the up, over, down, and disabled states. And then if I double click on this to go into Edit and Place mode, I can even adjust how that's going to look in those various states. So I can manipulate the Properties panel here and change the way that my text or my button looks when it's clicked, or when it's down, or when it's disabled. Once I've finished all this, I can save this entire project that I've created without coding at all, and I can save it as an FXP file, which is going to allow my developer to then take this project with my design completely intact and add the developer-centric aspect to it. So I can save this as an FXP file. Now that I've saved this, I can go over to Flash Builder, our developer tool, so we can see a developer-centric view of how that application looks. So when I come in here, I can go to File and import that exact same project file. So it's going to contain all the assets, all the transitions, all the artwork, everything that we did in Flash Catalyst, but now we're going to see that in code instead of the design view. So we go to Browse, open that FXP file, finish. It's going to create that version of the project here for me inside of Flash Builder. And then here you'll see all the files that we generated as we were doing that without writing code inside of a code view that developers can start to modify and adjust. So if I open the main.mxml file, which is where a bulk of the application lives, I'll see the code version of that Flash Catalyst project. So you can see there's the application. I've got my video tag down here. So we're able to see things in a very code-centric way. One of the new features of Flash Builder is that I can use the encode view. I can transition or see different states, and it'll gray out code that's not important for my particular state. So if I want to look at the home state, you see it'll start to gray out some of the things that only exist in that start state. So it allows developers to see in code the differences between states, just like the designer could in Flash Catalyst. We've also got a lot of developer productivity enhancements here in Flash Builder. So if I come over to the video element and I want to add an event handler, we can see the code completion in action here. So I'm going to do an added to stage event. I also get the ability to generate event handlers. So we're going to save a lot of time by having Flash Builder generate code for us. There's the code that was generated. And I of course, get syntax highlighting and code completion and all the things that you would expect from a typical developer tool. But I also have the ability to do things like get more information about specific types of components. So we've hooked up Flash Builder to our developer documentation. So if I hover over one of these components, this video element component, and if I leave it there, it'll pop up the exact documentation from our developer docs. So you can see all the properties of the video element. You can click inside to view everything that's going on. So you can get more information and get a lot more detail about how you're supposed to use certain components or certain features of the language. I also have the ability here to do some debugging, so I can get a picture of what my application is supposed to look like as it's happening. So let me go ahead and I can set a breakpoint here in this part of the application. It's going to run as soon as the application runs. So when I save this and then go to the debugging mode, it'll open it up for me inside of Firefox. But when the application loads, it'll pop up this little dialog box that says you want to go launch the debug perspective. That debug perspective in Flash Builder gives me a picture of everything that's going on inside of my application. So you can see here in my variables tab, I get all information about what components are on the page, what they're doing, what the properties are. I can see a list of the breakpoints that I've created. And I can also create my own expressions so I can evaluate certain things and check how variables are being used inside of the application. And then I can step through that breakpoint and I can see the application in action. So come back here to Firefox. There's our video playing. We fade it out. We've got our list component that we've used the dynamic data to update the look and feel of. I click one of these things. It'll take me to that new state. And there's my button component with the main menu and some of the changes that I made in the up, over, and down states. So hopefully, Flash Builder and Flash Catalyst will give you a great view of how you can work between the developer and the designer sides of the Flash platform tools in CS5.